Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. This is Doug C. Brown, and I'm bringing you another great guest. Her name is Heenle Turner, and Heenle has a company called All In Company, right? The All In Company. And they specialize in hiring 5-star employees. So we're going to talk today about how to hire 5-star employees from the employer's point of view and using not subjective data doing it, but objective data. So objective data meaning that you can actually measure it. It's metrics. And, I've done a lot of hiring and I can tell you this is the right way to do it. So listen to what she has to say on specific subject matter, because the first place she starts is you got to get very, very clear and specific about what you want when you're going to be hiring. And there's 11 attributes to a 5-star employee. And the reality is the cost of turnover when you do this the right way is wonderful because it's almost nothing. But the cost of turnover when you do this the wrong way, it is expensive when you go through this process. So pay close attention to the rules. And we talk a lot about doing this in sales, but you can do this with other departments as well and divisions just because, my specialty is sales. So we kind of skewed it toward that. However, you can utilize all these principles. And I've used many of these principles. I learned a few things during this whole process myself, but I've used a lot of these principles through the years. And so I can validate that they work. So without further ado, let's go talk to her. Welcome to the CEO Sales Strategy podcast. I'm really grateful you're here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Now we're going to talk about how to build a dream team with 5-star employees from an employer's point of view. And we're going to talk about how do you do it not using subjective data, but really using objective data. And why don't you give people a little bit about your background, how all this came together?
Sure, yeah. So my background is HR, and I have worked in the HR field for over 12 years, and I've worked with as an in-house HR practitioner. And then from there, I moved on as a HR consultant, where I spent the last 8 years consulting with businesses, anything from any industry, any size, like usually in the small to mid-size, so kind of right under about 50 employees. And then from there, I joined the All In Company, where we specialize in recruiting, hiring, and retaining 5-star employees.
So, it's always funny to me, not funny, haha, but interesting because, people go, well, I work with smaller companies, you 50 employees, that type of thing. And some people listening go, 50 employees, that's a pretty big, pretty good sized company, right? So I think the SBA, Small Business Association, classifies a small business as under 500 employees or something like that.
Oh, man.
I always found that kind of crazy. It's like, wait a minute, you got a company with 500 employees here, or let's say 499 employees. You have a pretty good sized company normally.
I mean, 200's a lot, Yeah. I worked with companies with, 10 or 15 employees, and now we work with businesses generally who have 15 or more employees. But, from an HR standpoint, the problems are still there, and every business still needs to profitably scale. They still need to make sales. They need to sell their products or services. They need to have the right people in place. So the problems are very, similar, and the goals, I suppose, are very similar.
So let's talk about process versus people for a second, because, sometimes people will come in and they'll talk about process and they're like, if I can just get a process in to replace all my people, I would be happy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I keep saying to them, look, process is only as good as the people who are trained to work the process.
Absolutely.
Could you elaborate or expand upon that? Like maybe I should ask a different question. Like, why are people needed?
Yeah, I mean, so people like you find, I think a business finds themselves in a position that they need people when they're really looking to scale and grow their business, because one person cannot do it all. So you may have a core group of people, and this is what I find, especially true in a business, like maybe under 10 people maybe. So they've got that group who have been with them forever, who have hustled along with them. And as they start to, gain more sales, or they get more clients, or they increase their product line, they find that they need more people to manage the different avenues that come along with that. And because the group of 5 or 6 just really can't do it all. And the goal is, well, gosh, I wish I had someone who was just like me, who understood it all, had the passion that I do. And you really need to have a process in place to make sure you're finding those right people. So we don't want you to settle for just kind of anybody, but with a pulse. So you need to find the right people to fill the shoes. And so that way you can focus on, as a business owner, or even like someone in a particular department, is to grow your area, right?
Right. So, I mean, let's take a manager, right? Because people are like, oh, I'm growing. I want to grow. I want to get a manager, right? So, like, I'll speak for sales because that's really my expertise area. So, traditionally, what they do is they go and they find their best salesperson and they go, you, my gosh, you could be a manager and you should be a manager. And they go in, and traditionally they don't do well as a manager.
Right.
And so, right people, right fit. That's kind of where I hear you're saying is, let's not just get a pulse in there, but let's get a right person, right fit. And not to say that the top performing rep is just somebody with a pulse, but there's two fundamentally different profiles for a sales manager and a sales, knock it out of the park type salesperson. So when we look at, like, okay, I am a company, I want to hire another 2, 3, 4 people. How am I supposed to start looking at this from the employer's point of view? Obviously, I know I need to fill a seat or two, but what's the right way for me to start thinking? Maybe I should be asking some questions up front or something like that I'm not even thinking of.
Yeah. So the first thing that you should do if you're, recruiting or hiring, or looking to grow your team, is to be very clear and very specific on what it is that you're looking for. And what you're looking for is somebody who has the right skill set, of course, and somebody who has the right mindset as well. So from a skill set standpoint, so like in your example for a manager role, what skills does a manager need? So they need to understand how to do the job, but really a manager's success is displayed through the success of the team that they lead. So really, the skill that they need is more related to managing people as opposed to managing the sales of a product. And then of course, understanding how that sales fit into its role and the rest of the organization. So you've got to have the skill set to manage others. And then from a mindset standpoint, you've got to share, like, as a manager, that's going to be somebody who is a manager in your organization. So like every other employee, every other 5-star employee, a manager should share their core values with you as a business owner. So the core values should align. And then you also need to be a 5-star candidate for a manager, in the sense that you're supportive, and you produce results, and you achieve goals, you can be limber, you listen. So these are the 11. So I'm listing off the 11 universal qualities of 5-star employees, and you certainly need a 5-star manager.
Yeah. So what I find fascinating about what you said is not really well understood or embraced by people. People think, look, I'll stay with sales again. They think a sales manager's job is to manage the team, but also sell. Right.
Mm,
So what I see a lot of times is when they have a team manager that sells, is the salespeople become setters and the manager becomes a closer at that point. Which is why, in some capacity, when they bring somebody up from, hey, they were the best closer, that they can actually continue that process. But as it expands or the departments expand, they can't do it all. So a sales manager's job is to grow the revenue within that team. And that's exactly what I just heard you say, that a manager's job is to manage that team, not
right.
actually to be the person out there, swinging the bat, but the person coaching people on how to swing the bat to connect and get on base every single time, if we use a baseball analogy, for example.
Right. I mean, because people, I mean, as from a perspective of trying to profitably scale the sales team, for example, I find it would be very rare that you'd be in a situation where you actually can have the manager go out there and close every sale, right? Sure, if it's like a very high revenue situation, or in some cases, like you can bring on other partners to help close the deal, but surely the team needs to be trained and can keep closing sales, right, without the manager there all the time.
Right. I found also managers don't coach very well, and that's part of their job classification.
Right. And that's in a lot of organizations, I see that big pitfall is they just find the most successful person on the team and promote them. But so you can do that, right? You can identify a great skill set, but you still have to identify the gaps and take the time to train the people so that they can become that great manager, or you need to find somebody who can manage people.
That makes a lot of sense. I love the fact about identification of gaps. How do you do that? Like,
Yeah, so typically when it's going to first start by looking at identifying, like, first, like, what the role in the organization is, and assessing, like, really what results that you need from each particular role. So, like, in a sales organization or in a sales for a salesperson, the results are probably going to be driven by the number of bookings, like the percentage of bookings, percentage of closing, and I don't know if there's a business development area there too, right? So say those are the three key elements. So then you're going to look at the person's actual numbers and or you're going to look at the overall metrics that you need. So if you need to close, book 100, close 50%, generate maybe X other of like prospect calls. So, and then once you identify what you need as a business, then you can look and see, okay, how successful is Joe at this metrics, and how successful is Susie at this metrics, and then from there you'll be able to clearly see, okay, well, Susie can book everything, but she's not closing anything, and she's not meeting with any new prospects. So obviously there's a gap there that needs to be filled.
that makes a lot of sense. Goes back to starting with the specifics and then driving it with the metrics.
Correct. Yeah, like this, the specifics in terms of what the organization needs is going to go beyond the department. So, like, when, how many sales do we need to close? Do we need to close in order to remain profitable, kind of as a business? And then you complete a reverse engineering exercise to finish out to understand how that gets spread amongst your team and per each person, right?
It makes a ton of sense. We are speaking with Heenle Turner.
That's it.
I got the right name. She has the All In Company. They're at the allincompany.com. And we're speaking about growing 5-star employees for your company, and how to do it and what to do. And more importantly, I think what not to do, and or equally as important. And using data like metrics objectively to measure these things versus, wow, I think this person's likable and I think they would be good for this position, which is kind of the old test of how people generally do hire. You said there were 11 points to being a 5-star. Did I get that right?
So there's 5 stars.
Yeah.
And so for all you numbers people, just hang tight. So there's 5 stars. The first star is that the person the core values align with that of the business owner. The second is that they are achieving at least a 7 out of 11 on the 11 qualities of a 5-star employees. Third, that they're meeting and exceeding your role specific, metrics that you've created for the position. So if you need to speak with 100 prospects, you're speaking to that number, right? The fourth star is that that they do have the role specific skill set that you need. So if someone needs to be good with people, good with numbers, whatever the aptitude and skill set is required, that the person actually possesses those. And then lastly, that they're producing a return for you. So in terms of the revenue that they're generating, they're bringing you at least 3 times on what you're paying them on payroll.
So 3x.
3x.
All right.
At a minimum.
Okay. And role specific skill sets.
Yes.
Can that be trained, or is that something they have to possess right out of the gate?
So I normally would test the skill set. So I would test the skill set that when somebody before they even enter the organization. So I would like them to come with the skill set, but what you really have to understand is, so we have a list about like 30 different attributes, and for the attributes, it could be something like passion, and for an acceptable rating on that, maybe like a 4 out of 5. But for something else, an acceptable rating is like a 1 out of 5. So there are different levels of the skill set that would be required at a minimum. So you just have to understand what your minimum requirement is, and with the kind of understanding that other areas you can develop kind of over time, but you've got to understand what your minimum acceptable rating is for these different attributes and skills, and including your skill set. So if you could train somebody on a skill, then it is probably going to be very low in terms of what you're looking for. But if somebody is telling you, oh, I know how to overcome a challenging customer, right? Or if someone is pushing back on when I'm trying to generate a sale. So you can test that skill by giving them a scenario-based question or asking them to send you an email convincing you to do something, right? So now you're actually testing that skill as opposed to just believing somebody when they say they can do it.
Going back to objective data again. So I'm laughing a little bit because when I used to hire a lot of salespeople, and let's say the company I was helping they needed them to cold call, and people would, they'd put, I was a cold calling genius, and they'd walk in and I'd be like, oh, so you can cold call? Yes. Okay, great. Cold call me.
Exactly.
Right. Here's my phone number. You call from your phone number, go out in the other room, cold call me. Right. And so the reason that we want to test these specific skills is because, well, I'm going to take a guess at this. Resumes are kind of full of bravado and yeah, I mean, thank you. Yeah, I was going to use the word lies, but they're more embellishments upon the truth. Right. Never forget, some guy was like, he put down, built $40 million in sales with the team in 1 year. And so I started questioning him, and I'm like, okay.
What was the total revenue for the organization?
Yeah, well, and I asked him, I said, well, how many people you got on the team? And he said, oh, I got, 40. And I said, okay, so 40. So they're doing $1 million on average. He said, yeah. I said, so you did $40 million? Yeah. I said, what's the quota per year? And he goes, I did $40 million. I said, no, I get it. What are they supposed to sell per rep? Right? $2 million. $2 million. Okay. So what you're really saying in this resume is you sold $40 million per se, but your team was 50% off quota.
Right.
So this goes back to the objective side of what I love what you're talking about, because I can tell from personal experience in working with people, most people don't test the scenario before they go into it, right? And my my personal bias is, if people tested getting married before they got married, the divorce rate would probably drop because they wouldn't get married, right? So,
Right.
and it kind of sounds silly, but if they tested about what it was like to really have children before they have children, they think probably a little differently, right? So why do we do this in our personal lives, or not do it in our personal lives, but in our business, we follow the same thing. We just go get married. We don't vet the person the way we're supposed to in business. We go have children because now we've got them in there, and now we've got HR headaches and all this stuff that comes along. So why do you think people just don't like do what you do for them? I know that you do it better, probably because you have a system down for this whole thing, but why do people not, in your experience in working with HR, what do you think that people, why don't they think like this versus short term, like just get a body in there and, put a pulse in and, et cetera?
I think I think honestly, I think people don't I don't think they realize the cost, right? So there is a different, so you think, so this is my guess, right? So maybe a business owner or a manager is looking at their performers, their top performers, and like, okay, great, they're churning these out, we're getting the sales quotas that we need from each person, so I just need to multiply that, so I'm just going to hire 5 people. And then they say, okay, great, so 5 people is going to get me, it's going to double, 5 more people is going to double my sales. And they don't realize that, well, that's not necessarily the case, because now you've got to pay for these people, and unless they are performing at this high level, then they're not going to generate that much revenue for you, and they're not going to do it immediately. So if you're looking for someone to do that immediately, you still have to figure out how they're going to do that, right? So maybe they have the skill set, but do they know your product? And so they kind of just say, okay, another body, that's the answer. And it isn't, right? Because it ends up costing them so much money in the rehire, in the person who leaves, and you have to replace them. And so they probably just look at that number and be like, okay, more bodies is going to produce me more sales.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, but there's something called selling at a loss too.
Exactly. Right. And I mean, and a new business owner would understand that as well. Like there's kind of a ramp up, right? So if you're which is, you kind of have to take into account the ramp up process or the training, or whatever it is. But if you're going to have a 2-month training program or 1-month training program, that better be a great training program where you're super clear on what you are expecting from people, so you can get them to the point where they need to go.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is training these people, getting them to where they want. But then let's go back to objective measurement, right? Because you could hire 5 new people and literally double your revenue, but 2 of them are not getting it out of the park. They're 300% over quota, and 3 of them are, whatever, right? They're 50% off, right? So they're still selling at a loss on those 3 people. But when they look at the overall number, they go, oh, I'm doing okay. So what I'm hearing is, let's optimize on the hire to make sure that all 5 people are performing, because when you have to let those 3 go, it's expensive. I mean, folks, write this down. Divorce is costly. So if you're divorcing out your employees, it's going to cost you 150, 200%, or whatever the number is per position. And, you will know that number better than I would across all positions, but it's expensive. And so the other thing that happens is when you have a couple of like superstar performers, and they know they're the superstar performers, and there's no competition for them, they will then start playing superstar games, and they'll start making demands and things that are not as reasonable as if you had all, especially in sales. So when I have a couple of superstar players, the first thing I do is I go out and find 3 more, right? Because then we bring up the competitive nature and these demands that they're making. It's like, well, why would I give them to you? You're not earning them, right? Well, I'm over quota. Everybody's over quota.
Right. Yeah. Everyone's performing at a 99% accuracy. So I don't.
Exactly. Right. So
Right.
one of the tricks that I always teach companies to do when they're, especially around sales, and I'd love your feedback on this on other positions, is take your top performer every year and make that your lowest acceptable standard, and then start hiring from there, right? Because then, let's say, I don't know, take a superstar in the world, Tom Brady, like him, love him, whatever, football guy. The reality is, if you had Tom Brady as your lowest acceptable standard, and then you hired people like Tom Brady and up, you're going to do better no matter what.
Right. And like you have to understand, what is it that, what makes up Tom Brady, right? And so who are the Tom Bradys, but really, how can you set, like, how can, like, because there's assessments and things that we use with our clients, and we assess their current talent, and then we ask candidates to take the same assessment. So now you're created a benchmark, and now you're measuring up your candidates against the Tom Brady's of the world, right? So how wonderful would it be for you to be like, oh, I'm not even going to consider, I won't enter another quarterback's name there, but not even going to consider
Jimmy Garoppolo. No, I don't.
I'm a 49er fan, but I'm also a Lance fan, so I get it. Right. And so, I mean, 6 million, I don't know. Okay, that's fine. So so like because that's the person you really want on your team, right? And so like that's what we want to do, is we want to build a process where when you're assessing the candidates that you have, you already know that they meet the benchmark that you've set. Then you're talking about, okay, now we're going to look at other things in terms of how their mindset fits into your organization. And then you issue skills testing. So you ask them, okay, call this number and complete a cold call, or send me an email send me 3 emails, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to evaluate them from a 1 to 10 standpoint on whether or not I'm going to open it. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So curious, if people, I'm sure there's people listening to this going, she's pretty smart.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree. Yes.
Even though she's a 49ers fan, she's still pretty smart, Yeah. All right. Football dig. Just so everybody knows, I'm from New England, so Tom Brady, you're dead to me right now. So he moved on. And Garoppolo, we wanted him to stay in New England, but they obviously, San Francisco made a better play. So, well, originally maybe
at the time, maybe, yeah. And now he's gonna be sitting on the bench once again. So good for him, right?
So Jimmy, come home, huh? Come on back. Yeah. So, so the question that I know is going through people's minds is, okay, you seem like you've got this dialed in, you got it down. How do they get a hold of you? What would be the steps to, if they're like interested in speaking with you or whatever?
Yeah, sure. Send me an email so I'll add my email to the show notes. You can also check out our site, and I've put together a quick litmus test just for you to make an assessment very quickly on 2 people on your team. So compare your best and your worst employee against the 11 qualities that we talked about. So you can check that out at 5staremployees.com/never settle.
So that's 5staremployees.com/never settle.
Never settle. And that's the number 5.
Number 5. Yes. Yeah. Don't write out FIVE. It's the number 5.
Yes.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes too.
Great.
I can imagine if I'm driving down the highway right now, I'm trying to write that thing down, right? So don't do that. We'll put it in the show notes for you. I can talk to you all afternoon. I appreciate you being here. because I'm enjoying our conversation. I know a lot of people are getting amazing value out of this conversation. So I do have a question, because I'm suspecting that somebody's thinking this, which is, okay, can I do this myself, or do I need somebody like you and your company? What's the better play, and why?
Albert Einstein said that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the different results is the definition of insanity. So I would say if it's not working for you now, try something new. Give it a shot. And with our system, we really have it perfected down, and when we recruit and hire people for the we do have over a 90% success rate in that. So we are proven kind of systems here, and we really just want to support businesses and help them successfully profitably scale. So give us a try, and we would love to help you. I mean, we could even chat over the phone, and you probably still learn so much, right? Without going through our kind of our whole program.
Can I get my feedback on that?
Sure.
You as a business owner should be working on the strategic growing of your company and stay out of the tactical play as much as possible in your business if you want to grow and scale a company. If you want to make your company also more palatable for an exit, whether you stay in the exit or get out of the exit, or you're looking down the line, the more systems you build in, the better off you're going to be. And hiring somebody to do a specific skill set that they already have is the ultimate leverage in the process. Now, it's one of those things you've got to vet your own and make sure that, like Heenle and her company know what they're talking about, but she wouldn't be here if I didn't feel they did. So I can kind of vouch for that. The reality is, though, I'll leave it at this. I bought a house to actually do as a real estate flip. And I used to do a bunch of flips, so I'm like pretty experienced at it. But I hadn't done a flip in, I don't know, 8 years, something like this. So I buy this house. We're doing really great. Boom, boom, boom. We're running into some, getting people in that we need in the right time frame. So I'm like, you know what? This place needs to drop all these trees, and we need to put a new lawn in. Well, I used to own a landscaping company, so I got the skill sets. Here's the rub. I put the lawn in, right? Looks okay. Took me 3 times longer than I figured it was going to, and cost me twice what I figured it was going to. Then I started getting some bids in on other people doing it who had the experience. And guess what? They were going to cut my time frame, and it was about 30% higher than doing it myself. But when I added up the amount of money that I actually lost not going after clients and building the company, I lost tens of thousands of dollars putting a lawn in. So I should know better, right? But the reality is, we as human beings, we always try to go back and we say, okay, what's the most cost effective? How do I, get this done? But let's look long term, the cost of turnover, the cost of your time, your value, your energy, lost client cost, et cetera, et cetera. So anytime that somebody listening to this can do something tactically and outsource it, and they spend their time generating more revenue, generating better things for the company, they're far better off. That's my 2 cents on that one. So,
yeah. And I mean, a lot of it's an excellent point, because the business owners that we work with, they don't want to spend they're better off working on their next project or growing their current business, and they can't do that if they're in the weeds of their own organization.
right.
So you've got to think, okay, I can spend a couple hours, maybe 10 or 15 hours each week, overseeing the operations. But when you have a team of 5-star employees, your team will actually do the work for you. So they'll do the follow-up, they'll check in on your processes, they'll look at and manage your systems, they'll do the work and make sure your stuff gets done, while you focus on, to your point, growing your business, or maybe even starting another one. That's one of our clients who went through our program. She actually had a doggy daycare business, and now she has the doggy daycare business, two training facilities, and another online training module program available. So very, very awesome. And we're so happy for her.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is if you're going to grow and scale your company, you can't do it alone. So eventually you're going to need people to do it one way or another. So again, look at your time, measure out an hour each day over the next, 7 days. Look at what percentage you're spending on tactical, what percentage you're spending on strategic building the business, and what percentage you're taking for yourself as, downtime, relaxation time. Most business owners, they're going to have a high percentage in the tactical side of it if they are stuck or in a position where their business isn't growing. That's usually what I find. And so if we can shift those ratios from tactical to strategic, all of a sudden, now the business is growing. And it's a little scary to do that because it's like just with the lawn, I know how to do this. I could do it, right? And I'm not feeling safe that anybody else was doing it because the people that were coming through were kind of like, but the reality is the lawn looks okay, but if I had found the right professional, which I did after I installed the lawn, it drove me nuts, right? The lawn would have looked better, most likely, because they're doing it every single day. I hadn't done it in 8 years, right? So it's one of those deals. So, well, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Love to have you back on a future episode if you're up for it.
Sure, let's do it.
Awesome. So then we bid you a wonderful day, and thanks for sharing everything you have with the audience here. And again, folks, go check it out at, was it 5-star 5 number? You want to say the rest of it?
5staremployees.com/never settle, and we'll get you that quick resource for you.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that was a lot to unpack there, right? Now, when we talk about 5-star employees, she's got 11 attributes that she has meticulously put together. And again, I've used a lot of these over the years so I can validate that these are actual, valid points of view because we utilize them in hiring. And I've hired literally hundreds and hundreds of salespeople. And so what she's talking about actually is close to what we used to do, but she's kind of added on more than what we did. And again, I learned a few things. Look at those 11 attributes, see where your current people match up to those 11 attributes, and then ask yourself that one question: what specifically do I want in this role, right? If you're going to hire for new people, get clear and specific on that up front, because I can tell you with high certainty, if you don't do that part, you make a bad hire. Why? You don't know specifically what you're going for. Just like if you went to an auto dealer and you said, hey, I want a new car, and you looked at it and said, I want a sedan, and I want this, and I want that, and I want that. And you can find that pretty easily. But if you walk there and you're like, I just want to buy something, hey, you might go out there and buy something that's a truck or a motorcycle or something like that, right? Gives you a very different outcome. So getting clear and specific is the top rule. Number one reason that people make bad hires. Number two is they do not measure the metrics and objectively look at what they're looking for and how that benchmarks out. Number three is they're so impatient when it comes to this because sometimes you got to go through a bunch of people in order to find those few people that fit that profile. So are you better off doing this yourself? You're better off outsourcing it. If you're better out outsourcing it, give them a try. If you're better out doing this yourself, give that a try. Now, the reality is this. Ask yourself the question, are you working tactically or strategic? At your level of business, what should you be doing? If you're supposed to be doing it strategically, but you're doing it tactically, guess what? You're holding yourself back. If you're supposed to be doing this tactically because you're at a place where, the business isn't strategically growing at this moment because it's just kind of in that smaller startup phase and you've got to do this due to budgets, et cetera, great, take it on. But anytime you can outsource something that's tactical and put a process around it, you will grow for the long term. It might seem like you're stepping back a couple of steps, but you will grow for the long term if you just keep with the process. All right, so if you like the subject matter, let us know. If you have a new subject matter that you're looking for, as always, send in an email to youmatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com. Let us know what you want for content. We'll find that and we'll source it out and we'll bring in experts in order to achieve that end goal. Now, if you love this podcast, please subscribe to it. Tell your friends. Please give it great reviews. If you find yourself thinking, you know what, I'd be a really great guest on this podcast, and you know you can deliver great value on and around CEO type sales strategies, you matter at ceosalesstrategies.com. Let us know what you can do. Maybe we'll have you on the show. And of course, if you're looking for people to get yourself, solo entrepreneurs, or sales teams in general for any size company, all the way up to, $billion+ corporations. If you want to get your people better and better and get them all selling at the top 1% of what they should be selling, reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com or hit me up on LinkedIn at Doug Brown 123. Well, with that in mind, I'm going to bid you a wonderful day. Thanks for listening again to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Come on back, tell your friends. Really appreciate that and would be grateful. And go out, sell something highly profitable if possible. Sell a lot of it, play win-win, and help people in their lives. You'll win too. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.